You got the promotion. Or the degree. Or the corner office. Or the approval rating that would make most people weep with relief. And you sat with it for maybe 45 minutes before the thought arrived, quiet and familiar, that wasn't enough. Not, I should celebrate. Not even, I'm proud. Just the flat, factual assessment that whatever you just climbed wasn't the right mountain, and somewhere ahead, there's a taller one, and maybe that one will finally do it. Will finally make you feel like enough. You've been climbing since you can remember. And you've never once reached the top. Here's what nobody tells you about people who achieve like their life depends on it. For some of them, it actually did. Neglect doesn't always look the way movies portray it. It isn't always absence. Sometimes it's a parent who was physically present but emotionally somewhere else entirely, behind a newspaper, inside their own grief, wrapped in addiction, consumed by work, or simply wired in a way that made attunement feel impossible. You were fed. You were housed. And you were, in some fundamental way, alone. Children are extraordinary surveyors of their environment. Before you had words for any of this, you were running calculations. You were watching what made the room warm up and what made it go cold. And somewhere between the ages of 4 and 7, you landed on a theory. Performance makes people pay attention. You brought home a good grade and a face that had been distant suddenly focused on you. You won something, finished something, impressed someone, and for a brief window, the emotional temperature in the house changed. You were seen. Not because you existed, but because you did something. That distinction, between being loved for existing and being loved for performing, is where it all begins. Your nervous system filed that information away not as a memory but as a rule. A survival rule. And survival rules don't feel like choices. They feel like facts about how the world works. The fact your brain learned, love is conditional, and the condition is achievement. Here's the part that surprises people. The overachiever doesn't keep achieving because they love achievement. They keep achieving because their brain genuinely cannot distinguish between stopping and disappearing. When attachment researchers study children raised in emotionally unpredictable or unavailable homes, they find a pattern in how those children regulate anxiety. Unable to rely on a caregiver to soothe them, they learn to soothe themselves, and the most effective self-soothing mechanism available to a small child is control. Control over what they produce. Control over how they're perceived. Control over the one variable that seemed to reliably affect the people around them, their performance. This is why the overachiever often describes their drive not as passion but as relief. The goal isn't to feel good. The goal is to stop feeling the particular dread that arrives when they're idle. Stillness is threatening. Not poetically threatening, neurologically threatening. In the body of someone whose early environment taught them that being unproductive meant being invisible, rest doesn't register as rest. It registers as exposure. And the brain that learned this doesn't unlearn it just because you grew up and got an apartment and a job title. It keeps running the old code. It keeps scanning for evidence that you're doing enough. And because the original threshold, enough to be loved, was never actually stable, the brain can never declare the mission complete. So you raise the bar yourself. Every time. But there's another layer to this. And it's the one most people never see in themselves. Underneath the drive is a belief that doesn't feel like a belief. It feels like a fact. Something so embedded in how you process your own existence that you've never thought to question it. The belief is, there is something fundamentally wrong with me, and achievement is the only thing standing between other people knowing it. This is shame, not guilt, not embarrassment, but the specific, wordless conviction that you are defective at the core. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am something bad. And shame, unlike guilt, doesn't resolve through apology or repair. It requires constant management. Achievement is brilliant shame management. Every award, every completed project, every exceeded expectation becomes a piece of evidence you can stack against the verdict. You build a case for your own acceptability, one credential at a time. The problem is that shame isn't logical. It doesn't respond to evidence. You can have a wall of certificates and still feel, in the quiet moments, like someone who is one bad quarter away from being found out. Like the whole architecture is made of paper and the right gust of wind will bring it down. And here's what makes it almost cruel in its design: every achievement temporarily quiets the shame, and then triggers more of it. Because now there's more to lose. Now the gap between who the world thinks you are and who you secretly believe yourself to be has grown even wider. The success doesn't close the wound. It raises the stakes. You pay for this in ways that don't show up on any ledger. You pay in relationships that feel perpetually secondary, not because you don't care about people, but because you've never fully trusted that being present is enough to keep them. So you show up as your output. You offer what you've done instead of what you feel. You bring accomplishments to intimacy like someone who only knows how to speak one language in a country where everyone speaks another. You pay in your body. Chronic stress isn't a metaphor, it's a physiological state. When the brain runs a low-grade threat response for years, when it can never fully signal safe, the body absorbs that. Sleep becomes complicated. Rest feels stolen. The jaw holds tension. The shoulders live near the ears. Not because life is currently dangerous, but because the nervous system was calibrated during a time when emotional safety was genuinely scarce, and it never received the update. You pay in joy. Not the absence of it, the inability to stay in it. Something good happens and you're already somewhere else, scanning for what comes next. The moment of arrival is always compressed. You reach a summit and your eyes are already on the next ridge before your feet have even registered the ground you're standing on. And underneath all of it, underneath the productivity and the accolades and the full calendar, there's a tiredness that sleep doesn't touch. Because it isn't fatigue. It's grief. The grief of a child who worked very hard and never once got to simply be held without having earned it first. People will tell you this drive is a gift. That you should be grateful for it. That your difficult childhood made you strong, and look how far you've come. And there's something in that that wants to be true, so you've let it land. But there's a difference between a gift and a survival mechanism you've never been allowed to put down. There's a difference between strength and the specific kind of endurance that develops when rest was never an option. What happened to you wasn't secretly good because it produced outcomes. What happened to you was a wound, and you are not your wound's productivity. The achievement is real. The work is real. The capability you've built is absolutely real. But the voice that drives it, the one that says more, faster, better, before they notice, before they leave, that voice isn't wisdom. It's an 8-year-old in a quiet house, doing everything they can think of to make someone look up. Recognizing that doesn't make the drive disappear. It doesn't erase the ambition or the capability. But it does something more important: it makes the drive optional. It opens, for the first time, the question of what you would do, who you would be, if you weren't trying to outrun an old verdict about your worth. Some people, when they sit with that question honestly, discover they still want to achieve. But they want to do it differently. Not from scarcity. Not from dread. From something that feels, for the first time, closer to choice. You are not what you produced. You are not the sum of your accomplishments, the length of your resume, the number of people who have been impressed by you. Those things exist. They're part of you. But they're not the part that was there first, and they're not the part that was there, alone, in a house that didn't quite see you. That part doesn't need credentials. It never did. The work was never actually about the work. It was about trying to answer a question that was never yours to answer in the first place: whether you were worth loving before you proved anything. The people who should have answered that, early and unconditionally, didn't. That's not a verdict. That's just something that happened. And something that happened is not the same as something that is true. You've spent years building a case for your own worth in a courtroom where the judge was never going to rule in your favor, because the judge wasn't external. The judge was the rule your nervous system wrote when you were too small to know the rule was wrong. What it might feel like to set that down, not abandon ambition, not erase the drive, but unhook it from that original terror, is a question only you can answer. But it starts, maybe, with this: the fact that you're still running doesn't mean you were never worth staying for. It just means no one told you that early enough. And now you know. You've achieved more than most people will in a lifetime. So why does it never feel like enough? The answer started before you were old enough to question it.